Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Round Table. Tonight, I'll be your host and moderator, Michael Barclift, and I'd like to introduce to you my co-panelists and our special guests. First, starting to my right,
Randy Brown.
And to my far left,
Elijah Morgano.
And our special guest tonight,
Elijah Coles Brown.
Now, for those of you who don't know, young Mr. Elijah Coles Brown is an inspirational speaker. If you've ever heard him speak publicly, you'll probably be just as amazed as I was when I first heard him speak. Elijah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's really good to have you on. I heard a lot of good things about you from an individual who attended one of our shows last time.
Okay.
And he gave me your card, and I looked you up online, and I saw you speak. And the first thing that I saw was Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech.
Okay.
Can you tell me why that's one of your favorite speeches?
I feel like it's one of my favorite speeches because not a lot of people know the full speech. And I found that in my travels because it is a 6-page speech and it's a very powerful speech and it's very compelling. And I feel like it would be better if our young at heart know that this speech is a very important speech in the civil rights movement. And one of my goals is to teach the youth and the young at heart about the civil rights movement. So I feel like this speech is very important. So that's probably why it's one of my favorite speeches to deliver.
Can you tell us how it happened that you first began to give this speech publicly?
In the 2nd and 3rd grade, my teacher, Mrs. Amy Wells, she would always have us write speeches on uncomfortable topics that may be sensitive to some other youth. And we would have to deliver these speeches on a weekly basis. And so I got comfortable with public speaking. And after that, my church asked me if I would deliver the full text of the I Have a Dream speech. And it took me about 2 weeks to memorize.
Off camera, I asked you if you saw the movie Selma.
And yes, I did.
We just celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday.
Yes, sir.
So, in your own words, tell us what Dr. Martin Luther King's contribution to the civil rights movement means to you as a young man.
Well, I think it means because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he was a man for peace and justice and equality. And him being in the civil rights movement, he did all of these nonviolent protests and these marches and these boycotts. And he was really a leader in the civil rights movement. And I feel like he was one of the people in the civil rights movement that felt like, hey, we need to do something about this, but let's not be violent about it, you know, because he was not a violent person, but everybody was angry at him, all the white supremacists and all of that, and they were so angry at him. But Dr. King, he kept going, he kept fighting. And I feel like his contributions to the world were so important. And it's not just the United States, it's the world. So he was a man for peace, and that's what he did. He fought for freedom, he fought for justice, and he fought for peace.
All right, well put. So, Mr. Brown, you want to jump in?
First of all, I think that you are an amazing young public speaker.
Thank you.
What I want to ask you, in doing some research, you did a public engagement where you spoke about Frederick Douglass.
I performed one of his speeches. I performed 2 of his speeches. One is a very famous speech, the 4th of July. What to the American Negro is the 4th of July. And I also do a speech that not a lot of people know about called The Appeal to the British People. And it's about a speech where he is talking to the British people and saying that, oh, slavery is bad here in America. But, you know, since they didn't have slavery in Britain at the time. So he was talking to them about how bad slavery was and the punishment of what you do when you commit a crime in the slave times. So he was just explaining all those details and explaining the horrors of slavery.
Frederick Douglass is one of my favorite heroes, one of my favorite runaway slaves. It was interesting that I read that Frederick Douglass used to sell his bread to white children in the neighborhood.
Yes,
You know that story?
I've heard the story where he sold, I believe the story goes where he sold his bread to the white children, and in exchange they taught him how to read.
Right, right. So if it hadn't been for that ingenuity at the time, he may have never learned how to read and write, and may have missed out on one of our greatest speakers and orators,
Sir.
right?
I've also heard another story where this lady, one of his masters, his wives, was teaching him how to read. And one day his master came in while she was teaching him, and his master told his wife that slaves are not allowed to read. But, it was a more violent tone, because, at the time they hated when the slaves read, because they didn't want them to know anything. All they wanted them to do was work. So when she was teaching him, he got mad, and he told her to never teach him how to read again. And so from that point on, she was nice to him at first, but then she started to become mean, and she didn't teach him how to read anymore. So that was one of his, that's what was one of the ways he was taught how to read.
Right, right. Well said. And we also want to give a shout out to Mr. Elijah's mom, who's here in the audience with us. She's obviously done a great job, and she's very proud of you, as everyone can tell. When we come back, we're going to get back into Elijah's background story and the genesis of how you came to this point, and share with the audience some of the struggles that you had to face getting you to this point. When we come right back after this break, this is Roundtable.
I'm enjoying this right here. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Definitely enjoying this. How you doing? Ultimate DeJaVu.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is a treat right here.
Right.
I was leaving, but I can't go nowhere.